Significantly improving the newly invented telescope, Galileo Galilei provided proof of the heliocentric model of the solar system and therefore challenged the traditional geocentric view. Often referred to as the father of modern science, his book, The Starry Messenger, describes his initial revolutionary discoveries. Galileo Galilei's The Starry Messenger. The poetic imagery and philosophical flurry that begins this book is most remarkable and, to my eyes, surprising. Galileo begins by remarking on the ephemeral and transient nature of renown. He says that seeking to escape the inevitable forgetfulness of time, humans construct great monuments or works of literature. Yet, speaking of nature, I quote,
"Since she well understood that all human monuments do perish at last by violence, by weather, or by age, she, betaking herself to the sky, she inscribed on the well-known orbs of the brightest stars, those everlasting orbs, the names of those who, for eminent and godlike deeds, were accounted worthy to enjoy an eternity in company with the stars."
Yes, only in the sky may a mortal human find everlasting renown. And now behold, he claims the pride of having found as new spaces upon which new names may be etched into the eternal annals of history. These new spaces are four new, wandering stars, planets, that incredibly revolve around Jupiter as they also revolve around the Sun. Needless to mention, all those claims were then, in 1610, most remarkable and even blasphemous. Jocularly, initially, the astronomer seems to prostrate himself by exceedingly praising the Medici family. Surely wishing to gain favor, he says that he has named these new planets, the discovered moons of Jupiter, after the authority. Yet, Galileo might rightfully be titled a philosopher, as he says to the royal duke,
"Your virtue alone, most mighty sire, can confer on those stars an immortal name, so that when you have conquered others like yourself, you may still vie with yourself, and become day by day greater than yourself."
So, at least in part, he is hoping to inspire commendable greatness among those who will unavoidably inherit great power. By the way, the moons of Jupiter are currently named, like the other celestial bodies, after Greco-Roman deities. In his introduction, Galileo also claims to have found that the stars are far more numerous than previously imagined, and that Earth's moon is not a smooth and perfect orb like the then Catholic Church would have you believe. Before explaining the aforementioned in detail, however, he explains how he came upon the tool that made these discoveries possible. He says he had heard a Dutchman had constructed a so-called telescope, and so he tried to construct one himself. He explains how to construct such a tool, as doing so will be key in having other people review his findings and join the exploration. Curiously, he says that an adequate telescope must magnify by at least 400. I say this is curious as I suspect that a telescope of such a power is still difficult to acquire by a common person in the 21st century. Now about the moon. His main claim is that it is evident that the moon has mountains and valleys. This may be appreciated as the telescope reveals that
When the moon presents itself to us with bright horns, the boundary which divides the part in shadow from the enlightened part does not extend continuously in an ellipse, but it is marked out by an irregular, uneven, and very wavy line.
Likewise, in the illumined portions of the moon there are shadows. Using the example of the shadows that mountains casts on the surface of the Earth, the philosopher even goes as far as attempting to approximate the high of the lunar mountains and crevices. This leads to the marvelous conclusion, which is a repeated theme among all Renaissance astronomers.
If anyone wishes to revive the old opinion of the Pythagoreans that the moon is another Earth, so to say, the brighter portion may very fitly represent the surface of the land, and the darker the expanse of water.
Of course, now we know that the moon does not contain lakes and oceans, but it is filled with craters and ditches. Skipping some details, Galileo dares to address a possible counter-argument to his observations. He concludes that the moon is not smooth, yet the outer edges of the moon, the periphery of the orb, does seem perfectly smooth. How can the side facing the observers on Earth be filled with unevenness, but not the edge of the orb? His answer: the smoothness is an optical illusion. He claims that the unevenness must appear smooth when viewed from a tangent. Likewise, that the moon must have an atmosphere similar to that of Earth, which makes the tangential vision less clear and thus seemingly smooth. The astronomers spend some time proving that the moon does not shine, even faintly, on its own. It an amusing thought.
The Earth, with fair and grateful exchange, pays back to the moon an illumination like that which it receives from the moon.
Therefore, if the moon seems to have a faint glow, that is merely because the Earth reflects light onto it as it reflects light onto us. Now the topic changes to the fixed stars. Perplexingly, viewing the stars from the telescope does not increase their size. At most, it merely increases their brightness. To Galileo, this is proof that the stars are so far away that we do not even truly see them. The planets appear like little moons, but the stars are to us mere light beams. Nonetheless, he does discover that
You will behold through the telescope a host of other stars, which escape the unassisted sight, so numerous as to be almost beyond belief.
he speaks of 6 different star magnitudes, star brightnesses. Yet, with his telescope, stars of the 7th magnitude, a previously invisible magnitude, are now visible. The astronomer describes and provides drawings of the portions of the sky he most inspected. This allows certainty on the nature of the Milky Way and the so-called nebulous stars. These things are merely individual stars that appear like a nebulous whole due to the great distances. Finally, we arrive at the details of Jupiter's moons. Herein, perhaps uniquely among the alpha books, Galileo's Starry Messenger becomes as if a real-time report. Meaning, he details his observations day by day, beginning with January 7, 1610. On this day, he was merely amused at seeing that Jupiter had 3 neighboring stars that were perfectly aligned to its ecliptic, to the planet's orbit around the Sun. 2 of these stars were east of Jupiter, and 1 was on its west side. Yet, the next day, nearly accidentally, he
Found a very different state of things, for there were 3 little stars all west of Jupiter.
Initially, he worried that Jupiter was moving faster than expected. Frustrated by cloudy weather, he had to wait until the 10th of January to observe Jupiter again. Amazingly, he found that now there was only 2 stars, both on the east side. As may be easily imagined, the philosopher writes with great passion as every day he returns to Jupiter to further confirm that these stars are moving around the planet. He says that due to time constraints, he cannot provide any mathematical details on their orbits, but does provide a table which suggests that it might be even 4 planets, 4 moons. The main conclusion is
To remove the scruples of those who can tolerate the revolution of the planets round the Sun in the Copernican system, yet are so disturbed by the motion of one moon about the Earth.
yes, the counterargument to heliocentrism ever was, how could all the planets revolve around the Sun while the moon clearly revolves around Earth? Now, however, it is clear that the other planets also have moons, and like Earth and its companion, together they all move around the Sun. Galileo attempts addressing why the moons of Jupiter vary so widely in size or brightness. He is aware that their rotation around Jupiter cannot change their relative distance to Earth sufficiently to account for their seeming change in size. So, he concludes that Jupiter must have a huge atmosphere, and it distorts the appearance of its moons. Presently, scientists opine that what baffled the Renaissance astronomer must have been the different reflecting surfaces that each moon contains. After all, as our moon, Jupiter's moons are not smooth and homogeneous. Although the prior marks the end of Galileo's Starry Messenger, editors have had the long-time habit of adding to his work the letters published by Johannes Kepler as a preface to his dioptrics. Although this work by Kepler aims to explain the science of how telescopes work, he includes many mentions of Galileo's discoveries and thoughts. I am obliged to quote the German about Jupiter.
The mind of the philosopher almost reels as he considers that there is a vast orb which is equal in mass to 14 orbs like the Earth, round which orbits 4 moons, not unlike this moon of ours. The creature which live on that orb of Jupiter, while they contemplate those 4 moons among the fixed stars, would swear by Jupiter in stone, like the Romans, that their orb of Jupiter remains immovable in one spot. O telescope, instrument of much knowledge, more precious than any scepter! Is not he who holds thee in his hand made king and lord of the works of God?
Kepler mentions how Galileo also discovered that Saturn also has 2 moons. These, however, are so large and close to the planet that they seem also as if attached to Saturn. Now we know that although Saturn does contain many moons, the Renaissance astronomers must have confused Saturn's rings for moons. Another letter of Galileo states that detailed observations of Venus and Mercury prove that these planets are merely reflecting sunlight, not shining on their own. Their reflection varies, nearly imitating the phases of the moon. This is to be expected as those planets are closer to the sun than Earth. The same cannot be said for the stars. Galileo does conclude that they shine on their own. Don't forget that this is part of a series on Renaissance astronomers. Likewise, on this channel you may learn about a lot of other books. Although most of the following aphorisms did not occur to me as I read this text, please consider.
The past speaks to the present. You miserable fool, you got all your premises from us, and your conclusion is to defy us? The future shall be your downfall.
As there is no permanence that interminable time will not change, is there also no truth that will not grow false? The past never passes, for it is always giving shape to the ever-emerging present. While the ambitious only seeks to surpass others, the great also seeks to surpass herself.